Welcome to a special Halloween edition of Still Worth the Journey. I'm your host Jermaine, and tonight we're diving into the darker sides of our minds, the ghost, the monsters and the shadows that can haunt us, especially when we're struggling with our mental health. Now, before we get started, I wanted to remind you that I'm not a therapist or counsellor. I'm just someone who's been through some tough times and wants to share my experiences in hope that they might help others who are on their own journey. Halloween is a time when we enjoy scaring ourselves with stories of haunted houses, ghosts and monsters lurking in the dark. But for many of us, these fears aren't just fiction. They represent the real struggle we face every day. The anxiety, depression, past traumas, and the negative thoughts that can sometimes feel like they're taking over our lives. In this episode, we are going to explore how these hauntings can manifest into our mental health and, more importantly, how we can face them, understand them, and ultimately overcome them. Let's start by talking about the ghost of our past, those painful memories and experiences that linger long after the event has passed. Trauma can be like a ghost that follows us, showing up when we least expect it and bringing back feelings of fear, sadness and anger. For some, these ghosts appear as flashbacks, nightmares or intense emotional reactions to certain triggers. When we try to avoid or suppress these ghosts, they often become more powerful. The key to dealing with them isn't to run away, but to face them head on. This can mean acknowledging the pain, talking about it with someone you trust, or seeking professional help through therapy. For me, the ghost of my childhood trauma has haunted me for years. There were times when I couldn't sleep because the memories were so vivid, like a horror movie playing on repeat. But over time, I learned that talking about my experiences, whether with a therapist or a trusted friend, helped me take back control from those ghosts. The more I faced them, the less power they had over me. Tip 1. If you're haunted by past traumas, try journaling about your experiences. Putting your thoughts and feelings on paper can help you process them and start to take away their power. Number 2, consider therapy. Therapists can provide a safe space to explore these painful memories and develop strategies to cope with them. Now, let's talk about the monsters that live in our minds, anxiety and depression. These are the creatures that can make us feel like we're trapped in a never-ending nightmare. Anxiety can be like a relentless monster, constantly chasing you, making you feel like something terrible is always about to happen. Depression, on the other hand, is like a heavy fog that wraps around you, dragging you down into the darkness, where it feels like you'll never see the light again. These monsters can be terrifying, but they're not invincible. The first step in defeating them is recognizing that they're there and understanding that they're not a reflection of who you are, but rather something you're experiencing. When I was in the grip of anxiety and depression, it felt like I was being pulled in two different directions. One part of me was always on edge, worried about the worst case scenarios, while the other part of me felt completely hopeless, like I was sinking in quicksand. It wasn't until I started to really pay attention to what I was feeling and why that began to find ways to fight back. So tip 3 here, practice mindfulness. By staying present and focusing on the here and now, you can often reduce the power that anxiety has over you. Tip 4, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Whether it's through talking to a friend, joining a support group, or seeing a mental health professional, you don't have to face these monsters alone. Now, let's explore the shadows, the negative thoughts that creep in and try to convince us that we're not good enough, that we'll never succeed, or that we don't deserve happiness. These shadows are like whispers in the dark, feeding off our insecurities and growing stronger the more we believe them. Negative thoughts can be incredibly convincing, especially when we're already feeling down. But just like shadows, they're not as solid as they seem. They're often distortions of reality, products of our fear, stress, or low self-esteem. I've had my share of battles with these shadows. They've told me that I wasn't worthy, that my past defined me, and that I'd never be able to overcome the things I've been through. But over time, I learned that these thoughts weren't facts, they were just thoughts. And like any shadow, they disappeared when I shone a light on them. So tip number 5 for you is challenge those negative thoughts. When you notice a negative thought creeping in, ask yourself if it's really true. Is there evidence to support it? Or is it just your mind playing tricks on you? Tip number 6, practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself, especially when you are struggling. Remind yourself that it's okay to have bad days and that you're doing the best that you can. As we navigate these haunted parts of our mind, it's important to remember that there's always light, even in the darkest places. No matter how powerful the ghosts, monsters and shadows might seem, they can be defeated. Healing and recovery are possible, and they start with small intentional steps. It's also important to recognise that you don't have to do this alone. Just like in any good horror story, there's a strength in numbers, whether it's friends, family or support group. Surrounding yourself with people who care about you can make all the difference. So tip 7, build a support network. Connect with others who understand what you're going through, whether in person or online. Having people to talk to can make even the scariest moments feel more manageable. Tip number 8, take care of your physical health. Exercise, sleep and a healthy diet all play a crucial role in managing your mental health. When your body feels good, your mind often follows. Tip number 9, celebrate the small victories, whether it's getting out of bed, going for a walk, or reaching out for help. Recognise and celebrate these achievements. They're proof that you are stronger than you think. Before we wrap up, I want to share a couple of listener stories that have been sent in. These are stories of resilience, of people who have faced their own haunted minds and found ways to push through the fear. A listener shared how they struggled with severe anxiety after a traumatic event. For years, they felt like they were constantly being chased by their own thoughts. But through therapy, mindfulness, and the support of their friends, they managed to reclaim their life. The anxiety is still there sometimes, but it no longer controls them. Another listener talked about the battle with depression and how it felt like being lost in a dense, dark forest. They found their way out by reaching out to a mental health charity, which connected them with a counsellor and a support group. They're now on a path to recovery and have even started volunteering to help others who are going through similar struggles. Now, these stories remind us that while the journey might be difficult, it's worth it. The darkness can be overwhelming, but it's not permanent. There's always a way out. Thank you for joining me on this Halloween special of Still Worth the Journey. I hope today's episode has helped you see that no matter how scary things might seem, you have the strength to face your fears and overcome them. The ghosts, monsters and shadows in our minds are powerful, but so are we. If you're struggling with your mental health, please reach out to someone. You don't have to face this journey alone. There are resources and people out there who want to help you find the light in the darkness. Resources for your support, we've got Samaritans. You can contact them on 116 123 24/7 helpline for anyone in distress. You have Mind. You can reach them at mind.org.uk and they offer advice and support for mental health issues. Calm, campaign Against Living Miserably. You can contact them on 0800 585858 and that's support for men struggling with mental health. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Remember, even when the journey is tough, it's still worth it. You've been listening to Still Worth the Journey with Jermaine. Join me next week as we continue exploring life's challenges, finding hope and reminding ourselves that it's all still worth the journey.